Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. You're probably not used to Zoom. You just got to make sure that your mic is clicked to the right mic on the Zoom screen there. Yeah, boy. Yo. Don't hear you, but I see you. So, where it shows the video, the little microphone, just make sure your microphone is set to whatever is supposed to be your microphone. You might have to go. There we go.
You hear me now?
Yeah,
there we go.
mate.
Good.
Yeah, there
Nice.
we go. What's up, dude?
How's it going, man? Thanks
Great.
for having me back on. Awesome to get
Absolutely,
on and talk
man.
with you again.
So glad to have you back. It's been too long, and you had a great idea for stuff to cover tonight. Our refresher, it's probably been, what, a year and a half, 2 years since we did a stream.
Yep.
And, last time we were chatting, we'd covered a lot of the problems in atheism and materialism, and I think it was probably right. Koof was pretty new at the time, and the landscape of everything has really shifted. I think we've seen a lot of vindication for a lot of the stuff that you and I talked about when it comes to scientism and people just sort of like falling into the cult of scientism without questioning it, especially the Koof and all that. But I thought tonight we would talk about that, the cult of scientism. You had some great ideas too to cover technocracy and that being a kind of a cult. And I thought too we could talk about some symbolic figures of what we're told are sort of revolutionary intellectuals or rebellious figures. I understand somebody was saying, you try to say Tate's intellectual. No, I'm just saying rebellious thinkers. And Dawkins too.
Yeah. Yeah, Dawkins, sure, yeah. Yeah, like just the modern ones like that they propel up now.
Yes.
You're speaking of those. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so like commonalities, and I'm going to argue, a lot of the stuff that you and I were talking about DMs, I think that there's actually commonalities between Dawkins, Tate, and Peterson that really don't challenge technocracy or the establishment in any meaningful way. I mean, they might ask some good questions at times, but I listened to your critique that you did of Peterson and Tate. I thought it was spot on. So let's start with maybe a couple of these figures. Let's start with Peterson. You had a good critique where you were talking about how, really it's kind of like God is like an idea that helps you fulfill your self-help goal. I thought that was really, really pertinent.
Yeah, exactly. And he just happens to use Christianity or some weird kind of pseudo version of it to do it. But I mean, wouldn't you say, Tate is doing the same thing with Islam, the way he described, like he was like the purpose of a religion. And I was blown away, not really a surprise, but again, blown away by his answer, which is, well, it's to keep order, to do things. Well, no, that could be an effect of religion.
Yeah.
But it could also not be. So, I mean, Christians, we could be practicing Christianity when it's the least pragmatic thing to do. Actually, it's likely to be the case.
That's a great point. Yeah, and I noticed Peterson has a really similar notion too. That, well, if you think of the figure of Osiris, it's essentially the figure, the god figure. It's the symbol. It's the archetype, of the father, and it's out there, and it's the ordering principle, And then it contrasted with Isis, okay? This is chaos. It's disorder. It's nature. It's the mother. Right, and it's like, and I'm only doing that because I want people to hear the better Jordan Peterson, which is
That's funny.
Literally the best Jordan Peterson out there is Jimbob. So I wanted to try to set you up for one that's even better.
Oh yeah, no, I always go back to like, well, life is like a game of Mortal Kombat. It's like actual and also symbolic, and it's like It's like you don't want Johnny Cage. You don't want, or what's his name who does the scissor, the kicks. It's like Christ is the ultimate, archetype, avatar to choose in this game. And from that perspective, it's like you can see why it's so popular. You would see why it's so popular because people, at least in the modern era we're living, they live in sort of a perpetual self-help mode.
Yes.
And it's not to say we say don't help yourself. It just means that this model can take theology and place it right in the self-help model and then kind of reconfigure the language, which I think Peterson does. He actually does a good job, and I don't mean morally good. He does an effective job at remodeling it and being like, it's a heuristic you should use to help yourself.
Yes.
But sometimes, that leads to just arbitrary goals. So if the goals are arbitrary, you could theoretically use Peterson's approach to do horrible things.
Yeah, I mean, I could model it on becoming the best cult leader and Satanist out there, right? I mean, couldn't I? I want to be the best cult leader. I'm not saying Jordan Peterson is essentially trying to be a Satanist. Right. I'm saying that because somebody will say, "You trying to say that?" No, right, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, yeah, if the goals are purely, self-interest, or if the goals are purely pragmatic, then it's not really telling me anything other than I can just use this as sort of a system to, as you said, better myself for my own ends. I think you had a clip of Tate saying something like, that God is essentially a kind of a concept that you shoot for to be the best version of yourself, which is basically just deifying this abstract image of yourself, which a lot of atheists actually point out that they argue that that's all theism is the deification of the notion of a father or, father figures. And when I was going through the Peterson course, as I was telling you, I'm about 4 lectures in. I was really, I was and I wasn't surprised, because one thing he does that you're accurate in pointing out there is that when he talks about the ordering principle of logos, it's not anything to do really with the second person of the Trinity. It's really to do with, like you said, inner structures of archetypal principles and patterns that we have all derived from our socio-cultural evolutionary background. So in other words, we've evolved to see the, alpha ape in the ape tribe. We evolved to understand that society needs the pharaoh figure, the dominance hierarchy, right? We need the dominance hierarchy figure to stand in as an ordering principle. So it itself is purely pragmatic. It's not actually a statement about the theological or metaphysical status of God. In fact, one of the, as you said, I think, perceptive characteristics that makes him so effective is that he shies away from actually having any commitment to whether God exists or not, right? He's agnostic on that position, because that allows him to say that this is all really just a kind of a, like you said, it's like a psychology course is really all it is for you to better.
It's like a heuristic, and then you're like, you borrow it and then you apply it, and then and it also, having learned some of this, is that it's like a counterfeit theosis in a way. It's like you're gonna better yourself, and you have a mirror of sort of a conceptual impersonal God that's like, out there, and you try to embody in some way, but that's increasing yourself. That's why it's a counterfeit. You're increasing yourself. You're not minimizing yourself. You're increasing yourself to get to God level. You're adding the attributes to the baseball card, and you're comparing the baseball card to God baseball card. And it's not exactly correct, but again, it pulls from men, especially the good in us that want that elevated, so to speak, state, Christ-like. We see Christ-like living, and so it's like it's not fully broken. It's half true, or I don't know if half is I don't know how to split it down the middle, but you know what I mean. There's a truth to what's being sought after. And I think that's also why these things work, whether it's Tate or Peterson. They're offering some pragmatic solution, but from, my paradigm, your paradigm is that the solution for the problem it's a spiritual problem, and so you can't have a pragmatic solution to the spiritual problem, and you can try to just deny the metaphysical aspect of this, and you just be like, no, just work on yourself and better yourself and make more money, and it'll help like culture and it'll help family. And this all sounds good, especially for this sort of like thirsty conservative traditional movement that wants something to protect or to grow. It's very useful, and we've seen that on play out pretty well on those types.
Yeah, that hits on exactly the two areas of critique that I've noticed recently, kind of going through a lot of the red pill people and the Peterson sphere and the normie tradcon sphere. Mm-hmm. I have one giant lump criticism that pretty much applies to all, two points of criticism, which applies to basically all of them, except for a couple outliers here and there. And that's number one, it's all predicated on there not being any metaphysics. In other words, they're all couched within classical liberalism. And nobody's really allowed to question or go outside of the classical liberal magic circle sphere of you can either be a classical liberal conservative or a classical liberal socialist Marxist. That's really all that's allowed in the public discourse. And almost all of those figures will hit on truths here and there, but there's these big blind spots when it comes to, well, when we're talking about this process of becoming better, when we're talking about this process of logos ordering our lives, how can we avoid the question of whether this is a real existing being or not? I mean, it's just, to me, it just seems so like isn't that logically the next question? I mean, for example, ancient philosophers asked the question, what is the good? What does it mean to be in potentia and to actualize your potentia and so forth? Peterson, for example, throughout his courses, he uses these phrases, good, evil, potentia, chaos, logos. Mm-hmm. These are all classic philosophical terms. How can they be divorced from the question of what are they, right? So
yeah, like, or who are they? Even
who are they? Exactly?
Yeah,
who or
who
what?
Are they?
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, the Greeks, of course, are asking the question of what is good, what is the good. Christianity carries it further and says, who is the good? It's God's the good, right? And in this scheme, though, we're really just supposed to, in the post-Enlightenment classical liberal system, we're basically just there to say, well, how does it benefit me? I don't care about what it is. I don't care about these what are perceived to be abstract questions. What do I get out of this? Right? And it's just this really bizarre, almost a kind of a hedonism. And you said pragmatism. There is actually a big pragmatic component to Peterson, because he was actually saying, one of the lectures, he was like, and of course the pragmatists, they're the only school of America philosophy, the pragmatists, but they've got a lot of great things to say. It's like, well, yeah, but maybe they also have a lot of blind spots, because if the only philosophy that America can produce is pragmatism, I mean, doesn't that say a lot about America? Like, look, I'm only concerned with how this benefits me, which is that classical liberal paradigm of Homo economicus, man is mainly seen as an economic being, and he can exchange and interchange even his own being in terms of, I mean, I think a lot of the gender issues, that's really just a reflection of classical liberalism commodifying gender itself, that you can now purchase and sell and identify whatever you want in a consumerist system. If I want to buy the identity through some doctor being a woman tomorrow, I can do that. To me, that's all consumerist ideology par excellence. But yet we're told by people like Jordan Peterson that what we need to solve all of this is more classical liberalism, more negative liberties, right? More of the very thing that's the problem. And my other critique of these two is that you're also never supposed to talk about geopolitical conspiracy topics, except for Tate every now and then saying that he gives credence to certain conspiracies, and Lord Voldemort. Pretty much everybody else in the tradcon, normicon, classical liberal sphere. I don't believe in conspiracies and geopolitical espionage because I'm sophisticated, and that's lowbrow. I don't believe in that stuff.
Yet you ask them, do you believe in corruption? And they go, of course. Well, I mean, those things go hand in hand. It's just that tainted word conspiracy. Whoever, whether that was a concerted effort, I know there is some history there. You would probably know better than me. The CIA purposefully tainting the word conspiracy theory for a real purpose at the time, and it kind of worked because it's really a naughty, gross word. It's like you're a leper if you. But the good news, and you're probably seeing this, you're probably looking at things and going, yeah, I talked about that 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And so more people are talking about what were previously seen as conspiracy theories or concepts or narratives that they were untouched, and now they're touched. Now you can touch them. I don't know if that's considered progress or not. Like, I'm always weary of when that happens, when there's suddenly a crack in that barrier, and now there's a new way to talk about these things. It feels like progress in the short term, because you're like, oh, great, people can now talk about the CIA in a certain way, whereas not even too long ago, you were just, your family and friends would just be like, just stop, dude,
Yep.
just please stop. But now it's kind of mainstream, maybe not fully, but it's suddenly you can talk
RFK
about it.
is a big, and I think it's ironic because a lot of people in the Peterson sphere would probably voice the opinion that, well, you're a bad person, Jay, because you talk too much about conspiracies, and yet here we have we have Peterson having RFK Jr. on. Whatever you think of RFK Jr., and he basically lays out a lot of the classic boomer era conspiracies, the ones that aren't even that controversial anymore, like, oh, JFK, whoa, right? Like, mind blown. JFK might have been killed in a way that is not official, the official story. And we can talk about stabbies and all this stuff, and it's like, okay, but Jordan Peterson has that very stream taken down by YouTube when he talks about that. And it's like, but you're still not supposed to talk about these conspiracy topics. You're a bad person if you did. I'm still a bad person because I've talked about these things. Even though, oh, well, you're right. A lot of these things were conspiracies and you were correct. But you're still a bad person. You see, because you're mean and you debate or whatever, like as if that means anything. But I mean, I think that you were correct a long time ago in seeing a lot of this as people realizing that there's a weakness in society and then tapping into that. Whatever their motives are, whether Tate and Peterson or whoever have bad motives, it's sort of like if you rewind to the early 2000s, Dawkins, I think, tapped into what he saw perhaps as a phase when, now that the internet's out there, now that we can see the promotion of libertarian ideas, a lot of people don't remember this, but when the Ron Paul revolution was going big, Reddit was pushing Ron Paul and atheism together. There were huge pushes for libertarianism and atheism kind of combined throughout the internet sphere, and you got those stupid songs of, do you remember the Songify version of Carl Sagan? Billions and billions of years. We're made of star stuff, right? So all of that was packaged together with this Reddit sphere of libertarian atheism. I'm not saying Ron Paul's an atheist, but I'm saying that it all kind of went together as a phase that the four horsemen of atheism tapped into in the 2000s. That kind of faded away, and then it turned into the newer phases of this tapping into, which then Peterson hit on, and it just sort of catapulted him to superstar status throughout the Trump era. I think he really spoke to, a lot of disaffected young guys who were looking for not just a father figure, but the more I've delved into Peterson, it's like he's speaking the terminology of science, which if he had just been a theorist, it wouldn't have worked. But he took the clinical psychology data and the Carl Jung psychoanalysis and turned it into a thing that speaks to everybody about self-help, but using all the terminology of science and evolutionary psychology and biology, but only insofar as it's acceptable to talk about evolutionary psychology and biology. Because if you start getting into like hypergamy and that kind of stuff, well, no, you can't talk about that. Although I think Peterson does it to concede the hypergamy point. He's not going to go anywhere else that, evolutionary psychology and biology goes.
Yeah. And he also talked, he went against the right thing at the right time. That was like a key element to his stage presence, was like they elevated him to that level because at the exact time it was sort of needed or demanded for, he spoke out against like the pronoun stuff and sort of compelled language and speech, which is a big market. If you were to look at it from a consumer perspective, and this is kind of where we're critiquing this, our modern Western culture from, the Homo economicus. Everything has a currency. You sell a market of ideas to people in a sense, and of course, all of this we eventually reject, but it is in motion. Like this idea that this guy is now fighting the right fight. I mean, that's all it really takes for an elevated figure. And that would include you and me, perhaps, like to some extent, where if we're perceived as fighting the right fight, and I mean culturally, I don't mean theism. Because that's a whole other level to me. But cultural, like you make a stand for the right thing at the right time, suddenly you're made into sort of like a temporary statue, and you could take it where you want it. And I think that Peterson was a perfect example of that, where he was sort of blamed and then sort of martyred and then elevated to some new status where people were listening, and then he became sort of like a product within himself. And this is saying it without any like actual judgment, like a value judgment. It's just kind of like fly on the wall what happened. And I think we see microcosms of that happening in different spheres of influence. The truther communities, the homesteading. People are looking for sort of these mini saviors, and it's ripe because people see what's wrong, and that's a good thing. People are kind of going, what the hell's going on here? Like, we're on the verge of some weird transhumanist movement combined with all of this nonsense and immorality and degeneracy. We must do something. And that's like, no one would say no. And we wouldn't say no, but because everyone's demanding that, it seems like there's this sphere where you can sell the solutions to it in different ways, right? You can sell it in a pagan way. You can sell the solution in a libertarian anarchy way. You can sell it in different ways because the problem is perceived generally the same in all of these places. And I find that kind of fascinating and horrifying too, because again, they're taking the approach of pragmatic solutions to spiritual warfare. And I think if you ignore that distinction, the spiritual, like in the world, not of it, biblical distinction, you will fall into a very pragmatic utility kind of system.
I was going to say they're all utilitarian, right?
Yeah,
whether it's Peterson, whether it's Tate, whether it's any of the normie conservative people. If you're in the classical liberal dialectic, even if you voice some criticisms of it, ultimately at the end of the day, everything is geared towards just you as an atomized individual, bettering yourself or getting some better feelies or a better business. It's like, well, do you got a Bugatti, right? It's like, how many Bugattis do you got, right? Mm-hmm. It's like that's still the classical liberal mindset, even if he's giving verbal credence to Islam. It's like it's not any real solutions beyond saying things like, well, the Matrix keeps you down, bro, and this kind of stuff. All right, but we need more than that, because all of those solutions are premised on the same assumption of the classical liberal worldview, which is that man is really just another kind of material being. But if the anthropology of the Enlightenment is wrong, how are they going to be able to give the correct diagnosis, not just of the problems of man, which are almost always economic and material in their assessments, and how are they going to give any solutions? Because the solutions are just going to be something like, well, better living standards. Why you hate capitalism, bro? You got iPhones and a refrigerator. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't equate to me accepting Locke, Berkeley, Hume, and Kant as the ultimate creators of civilization. It's like, what about man's soul? What about man's spirit? Those writers don't speak to the inner deep need that man has spiritually. And one thing that I think Peterson taps into, I don't know, I wouldn't say he's giving good answers per se, but he's tapped into that inner desire that people have for something more than just material gain. But he's still couching it within the classical liberal dialectic, and I don't think he's able to get out of the classical liberal dialectics, and that's the main problem.
Yeah, and the irony that I see is that at least it's a possibility if you take the classical liberal approach and individualism and a very constitutional view on things, but you argue the standard or where we ought to get to is like you said, higher standard of living or happiness. Let's say we just take this broad approach. It's actually logically possible that the World Economic Forum idea of reality that should be could actually be compatible with that standard. And that's the problem. There's a contradiction ready to happen, which is if you say, no, we argue for individualism and liberty and all of these kind of concepts and principles, but our standard for what we're getting to is happiness or something like that. What if the World Economic shows the classical liberal group of people across the world that they're actually right, that it would produce if you don't own anything? What if they're right about that? Your standard, you'd have to accept it. That's the logical consequence. And I don't think they see that. And I don't know if that's purposeful. I've kind of abandoned looking at things from this perspective of like automatically assigning some sort of like group of people strategizing. I know that exists, so I haven't abandoned my conspiratorial lens at all, but I think it's just spiritual on a level where people go toward pragmatism. And if you do it, classical liberalism is available to you and you feel like you're on the right side, but also the World Economic Forum, the monetary system they want to create, the that whole circular system they want, the circular economy.
Right.
It actually is also pragmatic. It's just two different. It's like utility. It's like when who's the guy who spits a lot? You do a great impression of.
The problem with the Peterson is the Peterson with the principle of the mechanistic modes of production.
Yeah, exactly. Snorting
and he's just arguing against Peterson, but they're all arguing from the same fundamental starting point, which is a utility view of the world. It's like in theism, when you see the debates between the classical foundationalists and the naturalists, you're arguing the same starting point, the world, physicality, these kinds of things, the correspondence theory, where you're just looking at what is. You're not questioning. This is why I think you've been so impactful, and hopefully if I've done some impact introducing people to the transcendental line of argumentation, whether it be for God or anything else. It's so fundamental to argument because you can't just grant that. And that's one of the big pitfalls of the Enlightenment and classical liberalism. They just take things ad hoc, just like Dillahunty.
Right.
Well, I don't need to account for logic. I just take it for free. And they've done the same thing, right? They've done the same thing. And you go, oh, how could you question such a thing like the mind? Well, no, we ought question the mind if it's foundational to our views on things. Why we ought to pursue truth? Why is the world regular? Like these questions have to go back to some fundamental starting, ultimate circularity, and they just don't take it there, and they don't think they need to because it's axiomatic, And it's my axiom, and it's just broken. It's just broken. It's a broken axiom.
I mean, if I just say, well, my axioms are the opposite of your axioms, and so how do we adjudicate between contradictory, self-evident first principle axioms, right? And I think it's interesting too, because going through these Peterson course lectures, there's these weird moments where he will hit on some of the points that we're talking about here. So it's almost like he's almost a presuppositional transcendental thinker. For example, I think in the third lecture at the end, he's got this elaborate discussion of how a human being is kind of like a computer, and in philosophy it's called Mariology, where you have a parts whole relationship. So how does you can't make sense of the keys without the whole keyboard and the screen and the operating system, right? The operating system needs the hardware, the base layer programming requires blah 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 blah. So like all of the parts require the whole, and the whole requires all these parts for this really intricate system to work. And Peterson's point in part in that section was to say that our lives, human beings, their conceptual schema, their assumptions about the world, all of that is embedded it's nested within a whole context. And so there's not really anything that sticks out as like some sort of self-evident piece of data or something that stands alone. It's always theory laden. It's always couched within the holism of what we're talking about. So it's a holistic approach, which we would agree with. But then the weird part is that he admits all that, and then will kind of like say, and it's sort of a Kantian idea, like, but that's the mental structure that you have that structures the world, and I'm not going to say anything about what metaphysically exists. Well, first of all, to say that that's the mental structure is a metaphysical statement about the metaphysics of the mind. So that's a so he doesn't. But so he's not
contradiction.
He's not understand. Yeah, that he's not understanding that even though you might have the intention of not making metaphysical claims and statements, you're still doing it. You see, and so but the whole project that he's engaged in is premised on what seems to be the distinction between phenomena and noumena, right? Because in the clinical psychology stuff, he's like, well, we're just studying the phenomenon. The phenomena as it appears to you. I don't know what's going on out there, but as it pertains to you, right? So we're only studying it that's phenomenology, okay? And he's saying I'm going to apply phenomenology to clinical psychology, and so we're just studying that. But it's not possible to talk about worldviews, which he does all the time. He's like, worldview. It's like, okay, so how does a worldview not have metaphysics and epistemology, which are like real domains of philosophy, right? You can't. It's like a bait and switch. In other words, and maybe he just doesn't even know, like he's not familiar enough with what philosophy is to know that you're still making metaphysical claims and statements, even though you're backing off of it. You know what I mean?
Right. I think people, maybe they even understand the three branches. And yet they think they're somehow, you can pick up the branches as if they're not ultimately connected to one root. And that's the thing they ignore. And that's kind of leads you to, well, what justifies all of those branches? Someone picks up the epistemic branch and they're like, no, I'm not talking about morality or metaphysics. And you're like, yes, you are. If you're talking about one, you're talking about the other two at any given point in time. And you might focus more on one, but you're always assuming the other two. And I've seen this, and it's with Peterson as well as many others. They pick up the stick as if they found a branch called knowledge or metaphysics or morality, and they're like, no, I don't want to talk about that other thing. I'm holding this stick, and we're going, no, you're holding one thing, conceptually that leads to something, and our argument would be it leads to a who, not a what. There's another problem with Peterson. He's always, even though he admits, Christ is the ultimate mode of being in which you live your highest potential. And yet it's not actual to him. It's not like not only actual, but necessary, like a necessary that when you ask what is truth, it's a malformed statement. Yep. It can only be who is truth, or what is morality. And I get this. There's a colloquial sense we use these terms and argue with people, but it doesn't even make sense to say what is truth. It makes sense to say who is the basis of morality. It doesn't make sense to say what, and even biblically, Pilate saying, what is truth, right? He's not saying who for a reason. I mean, that's a very key expose into even today's thinking, that we're descriptive. We're merely always just describing things, and whoever has the best conceptual description of things kind of wins. And it's a failed position, because we're not dealing with this other aspect of our existence, which is personhood. And you need a grounding for personhood, or you're a machine. You're a truth-seeking machine, Jay Dyer. It doesn't work. It falls apart. I want to work on my French accent, but people seriously take that position that they're a machine, and then they don't realize how that negates knowledge. They just don't. I've tried to walk people through this so many times that they don't understand that the consequence of being a mechanism, a mere cog in a larger machine, is that they don't have access to any knowledge, because it's all determined by laws, by just physicality acting on itself.
Yeah, so there's no longer, it would amount to a dysteleological universe. And if the universe is dysteleological, then every one of the components within the universe are also dysteleological, meaning that every one of your decisions is not any better or worse than any other decision. So, in fact, there are no truth versus falsehood choices. You're not actually choosing the true versus the false, because all choices are equalized in a dysteleological universe. And if that's the case, that would completely undercut the possibility of the true and the false. Now, to make this point, as you were saying too, in regard to the true and the false, if I think about the good and the bad, that's at once a metaphysical claim and an ethical claim. You see, you can't divorce those, right? So, by the way, to the people in the chat, you're welcome to ask your questions if you'd like via the super chat function. Super chats are through Streamlabs. So you use this link right here, and Streamlabs will allow you to do your super chat question. One other thing I would say about Peterson too that comes to mind is when he was talking about then embeddedness, one thing that I think he misunderstands is he seems to have this idea that there's a Newtonian idea of the world that revolves around objectivism. So if you think that there's objective truth or objects in the world, that necessitates Newtonian physics and dead matter materialism. And he contrasts that with the ancient conceptions of understanding the world that we find in shamanic and heroic traditions. And those shamanic traditions, he says, for example, and he gives examples of like cartoons. He plays a weird cartoon of Roger Rabbit when Bob Hoskins is going into the cartoon universe, and all of reality and nature sings. Even inanimate objects are alive and have mind, right? And Peterson's making the point that the shamanic mindset or worldview reads the world in a totally different way from the post-Newtonian physics way. Now, I agree with him that it's true that they have a different conceptual schema. However, it's totally wrong to say that the notion of objective truth and objective facts is tied up or bound up with Newtonian physics, as if Plato, Aristotle, medieval philosophers, theologians, like they didn't think that 2 + 2 equals 4 is objectively true. It's very bizarre sort of. It's almost like he thinks it's either or. Like you either choose this ancient initiatic view of knowledge where everything is embedded as alive and having psyche, which is a Jungian type of position, or you choose the modern post-Newtonian scientific objective view of the world. And he says that reality is much closer to the personalist subjectivist approach to reading things that's a network of embedded things in the shamanic idea. Now, I think this is totally a false dialectic, as if I have to choose between like an animism or like Newtonian Darwinism, scientism. I mean, that's crazy.
It's still that's still present today. Wouldn't you say like all the light workers and all these people, you know, like I see some of these people online, the panpsychics, the people who are trying to get Christ consciousness, isn't it all the same problem, this false binary of like, well, it's either naturalism, empiricism, and straight mechanistic view of things, or it's this other thing where all monism, maybe it ends in all is one thing, man. And it's the consciousness. I asked the Christ consciousness person today, can you show me consciousness? You know, that like, at least at the human level of what we know consciousness. I'm not talking about like a conscious crab that's somehow aware or reflexive to the external world.
Lobster? Dominance hierarchy, the lobster.
Yeah, it's like, but is there any, you know, this Christ consciousness is also, again, not personal, impersonal, out there, a cloud of sorts, the new age cloud consciousness of information and data that we're seeking. Some of these people are like, I'm getting the codes, right? They think they're getting the codes from the cosmic mind or whatever, right. And it's not personal. And then you ask very simple questions like, how do you interact with the ultimate? Right, you're seeing as the ultimate mind of all things, but it's an impersonal mind. Why ought we interact with the impersonal mind? Where do these oughts come from? Right. Where's the value judgment of we got to get the codes from the Anunnaki or whatever? you know why?
I had one of those dudes call in. Yeah, I had a.
Really?
Yeah, I had a Grail lore guy call in. He was like, all of the ancient religions have Messiah figures, and it turns out we are the true Grail as individuals. And I'm like, Messiah is a Hebrew idea. So
oh yeah, I heard that. I actually heard that.
Okay, yeah.
You're like, wait, what's this word Messiah? Do you have another, like a replacement, basically? Because you can't just borrow that word. It's a specific meaning in Hebrew, right?
Right. Yeah, the anointed one, right? So it's connected to, like, you know, the Levitical ceremony of the anointing of Aaron and whatnot. So, yeah, exactly. And then I think you're spot on there that the technocratic evolution of like things going towards technocracy fits perfectly with all of the New Age stuff because it's all about monism and unity over particularity and multiplicity. I mean, that's the whole presupposition of almost all the New Age stuff. And I just did an interview with the author John Kleizek, who also, I think he's recently become Orthodox. We did an interview a couple of nights ago, and he was talking about Barbara Marx Hubbard and all these New Agers who actually prepared the way for all of the ESG, DEI, critical theory, woke stuff in the corporate world, because you couldn't have any of that if Barbara Marx Hubbard and Leary and all these figures hadn't come first, right? And that's why Klaus can now talk about in his books, and I think it was you actually that 2 years ago, you had said, hey, you got to do Fourth Industrial Revolution. Well, I read that, and there's these places in Klaus where he's like, he actually says it in another book, this was before Grand Narrative came out, but in Fourth Industrial Revolution, he's like, there must be the new narratives. There must be a new covenant of the morals. We will have a new morality. He's talking about the new corporate morality that will be a new agey social justice ethic coming from all these horrid boomers like Barbara Marx Hubbard, who prepared the way for the ESG, DEI, and all this crap.
Yeah, and then Harari comes parallel to him and says, well, let's reformat all of the world religions, especially the Bible. Like they always zero in on the Bible and the Christian view, of course. And they go, well, we can make an AI version that's all inclusive. And I asked this in DMs. It was about Peterson, but this kind of syncretist approach to pairing technology and making it work for all religions. If it's coded right, we can finally get to a point. If everyone's wearing a helmet, how could you argue you don't have the world you want? Well, I mean, we might actually not be able to argue that. We might have to actually say, yes, if you get a bunch of people in helmets, in the Apple Vision, and they're conjurers of their own existence, right? Of course, it's a Faustian deal because they're just degenerating necrosis and muscle atrophy in the corner of their Amazon, whatever. What do you call them? The coom pods. But they've got the helmet on and they're conjuring up their reality they want. And there are people really actively pushing this as the solution to all despair, human despair. Well, you can be in another world. And if you don't know the difference, what's the point? And actually, that's a decent question. It's a little extreme, but that's something we'll have to face when people say, well, if you do reach that weird, you jump over the uncanny valley. And we find ourselves in this space where you and I, Jay, can't determine some image from reality or something like that, right? If we get to that point where it's harder and harder to distinguish, a lot of these people who argue, well, can't I just be in a coom pod, and be fed at the umbilical cord, Amazon umbilical cord, and I think the answer can't be a pragmatic answer or preference based. I think you can't argue against this stuff unless you go deeper into what it means to be a human being. And I think it's unavoidable to appeal to the Christian view at that point, or else it's a trap. If you make the argument, it's all about it's like technology versus like reality, you're going to wind up in a corner trying to defend what's real or not as your main focus, and that can't be the only focus of our existence here, is debating like what's real and what's not. You know what I mean? It's like there's more going on here.
Yeah, there was a guy that called in today in the live stream I was doing to prepare for this earlier, and he was a 10-year disciple of Peterson actually, and he was talking about he was really deep into all this stuff. He went really far into a lot of the Vervaki and all these figures that are kind of adjacent to Peterson and all the different theories that they have. And he was making a great point that for what he realized was that eventually for Peterson, truth is still abstracted. It's never incarnated. It's always discarnated, right? And my critique of that would be that on what basis would we have a moral objection to, or a philosophical objection to, living in a coom pod or in a virtual reality existence if we don't have a good theology of the body? And if truth is not incarnated, if everything's abstracted, then the Gnostic tendencies within the Petersonian mythos, to me, wouldn't that lead to living in a virtual world in a coom pod? I mean, why wouldn't we do that if it's all about, like you said, only what benefits us in the here and the now, only what makes us happier, right? If we have that utilitarian happy points principle, and I'm the rat in the coon pod maze that keeps dapping the thing to,
yeah, totally.
I mean, seriously, like, why wouldn't, so if man's highest functions and faculties are only his intellect or his mind, then the logical step would be to disincarnate and exist in a purely mental state. And I know that Jordan Peterson, I don't think he would say that, because I think he and Pajot just did a podcast. I've not heard it, but I'm assuming that Peterson and Pajot, I know Pajot would critique the whole idea of living in a coon pod and having a virtual existence. I'm assuming Peterson would agree, but I find it odd that, okay, but you also have within your worldview as a classical liberal / Carl Jungian psychoanalyst guy, this preference for disincarnated truth that's abstracted and sort of a movement away from the body.
Yeah, it has to include every part of our reality, and the body is a part of our reality, and just this, and again, there's this half truth of like us transcending death in a way, and transcending the here and now physical form we're in is something that's within the Christian view. It's just that you can sell it easy through other views. And that's exactly what Kurzweil and all these futurists have done. They've tried to remodel.
Well, it's also what Hegel said, right? There's a great book called Hegel and the Hermetic Tradition, which points out that in Hegelian philosophy, the idea is that all of reality is evolving towards being self-conscious. So even material existence is actually in a dialectical evolutionary process philosophy, moving towards what Hegel called the omega point. And the omega point is when all reality realizes that it is God. So
singularity sort of like, adjacent.
Exactly. Yeah. See, this is what prepares the way, I think. I don't think you could have Kurzweil without Hegel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this notion, which is funny because to conceive of such an event or an occurrence or a moment in time, you couldn't know, if that were true, you couldn't know when you got there anyway. So it all falls apart when you get there. So you're, we've like a movie starting off with someone arriving. It's who's the guy who makes all Nicolas Cage. Let's say Nicolas Cage wakes up and he's in the singularity. If the singularity was the singularity, whether it's Kurzweil or Hegel, the way you just described it, they wouldn't know to call it such a thing, because everything would be in a sort of like it's like monism. Everything would be indistinguishable from everything else. There's no universals, there's no particulars. Everything's sort of this sort of globby. And you can see why the New Age might like this. Yeah. They don't like the technology every time, but the concept that the tech is promising is absolute indiscernible unity, I would say. Like just perpetual unity, which is funny because you need to be outside of that to call it that. So of course the masterminds would have to be outside. Like Elon Musk is like, no, hook your brain up. I can't do it. I need to stay outside and kind of manage things. Bill Gates, do all of these things. Not for me. I have to sit outside and manage it, right? So they're always looking to create a system that sells this kind of concept to people. But you still need the managerial class on the outer ring looking in and being like, no, we need reasonable people to manage this stuff. Not me. You guys do it. Yeah, we're going to stay outside. And I see that's pretty present with all of these kind of movements. There's always like this, I don't know if you'd call it the like a new era of the philosopher kings concept.
Oh, absolutely. In fact,
they're like the special.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, the movement from Plato's Republic, which is philosopher king, guardian class, plebes, that shifts. I mean, even within the Republic, it's governance by basically noble lie and secret society, right? So there's the myth of the magical ring in the Republic, which represents the noble lie and all this stuff, and how the philosopher king has to lie and basically govern through a kind of a secret governance. But this evolves by the later laws of Plato, where instead of a philosopher king, it's actually a council. So he has like a council of oligarchs that are a deep state. And they're literally a shadow government, because they're the council of night, because they meet in secret at night. And they're actually spies. He says that they actually go and do. So an espionage spy network oligarchy government is the final mature, laws phase of Plato. And so it fits perfectly with technocratic oligarchy, because Plato's system is an idealized system. I mean, Hegel is a type of Neoplatonist because he's just basically taking Plato's sort of static philosophy and turning it into a process philosophy. So rather than it being a monad that exists in a transcendent realm of forms, the monad is actually the endpoint of history. It's when everything is melded into the ultimate one. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I'm always looking, even if I have a reaction to these things as they're spoken or written down or whatever, I always look for what's partially true about it, and like what is it in the human that seeks that, and is there a good version of that? It's just perverted, and almost every time there is in Christianity, you can point to the parallel of what they're seeking to gain, except they're just trying to materialize this thing. But it's a category error. They're in the wrong domain. It's not, you can't capture those things that you're trying to seek spiritually that are transcendental concepts and somehow, melt them down and make them an ingot in the world and hold them forever. But they try, and they're going to fail every time, obviously, but and they need to take it step by step. Like, for instance, the whole concept of like sentient cities, these alive, half alive, half smart cities that are platforms, that are apps, so to speak. Like, we think of apps like our phone and stuff because they're intelligent in a sense and they communicate and help us. But if the Internet of Things, as they're describing it, comes to be in a form of a city, even if it's a small city, it's a sentient city in their language. I reject that whole concept of sentience kind of, but in their, if you grant them their model, what they're turning everything in, the first step toward this ultimate unified system of rats hitting the button, like you said, for their next fix is this smart city concept. I think it falls apart because you can't provide the other deeper things human beings want. You can't ground love in strict material and quick benefits and appetites. You can't ground humility. You can't ground prayer and all of these other things that Christianity has. You can't do it. So they're going to eventually get all their gluttony in, and they'll probably all just go kind of crazy, like the mouse experiment that John Calhoun did.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't the mouse experiment a great example of why the smart cities is going to be a nightmare?
It's a nightmare city. Yeah.
Now
it's zombies.
Yeah, and I like that you were hitting on the virtues there, because you don't even have to go to Orthodox theology. You could just read Aristotle, and Aristotle realizes that the virtues have corresponding vices, and we really can't make sense of ethics at all unless there's some notion of virtue and vice. But virtue and vice is immediately going to involve us in value judgments, and you'll notice that a lot of the theorists, the Jordan Peterson type people, like, they'll talk about bettering yourself or things that are good for you, but it's not ever going to be about virtue and vice. It's not going to be about good and evil, right? Good and evil and virtue and vice mean that there's such a thing as sin. There are standards, these kinds of things. So that's why it's easier to couch it as a kind of psychological process and to shy away from the virtues. But as Jimbob's pointing out, like, we're bound up with a virtue ethic. The other ethics that are offered in philosophy are just gigantic historic failures. Consequentialist ethics, this kind of stuff. It doesn't work. Utilitarian ethics, right? It's subject to all the problems that we've been critiquing tonight. Now, you were talking about, and when you mentioned this in your DM to me, you said cities as apps and platforms. Are you speaking specifically just of like a smart city, or do you want to go into more detail as to what that is?
Well, I've been looking at a couple of those, but yeah, in a very general sense, the Internet of Things applied to a geographic, diameter, a perimeter, let's say, and those are already set up. The problem is, I think you have to level most of them, aka Ukraine or something like that, and to build it straight up from the bottom, because they know that the culture that's lingering might not be compatible, or even not a single culture, but many cultures might not be compatible with this approach to turning the city into a platform and seeing it that way. And what I mean by that is that to get into the city, to get on the platform, you make agreements, and you basically swap out what we call civil liberties, constitutional rights, etc., with terms and conditions. And if the city and the platform provides it as a network what people want or need, they think they need, at that very sort of pragmatic, very, very appetite driven level, which is prime right now. People are prime for that. They could essentially do that. They could essentially make the city its own platform, and you sign your waiver, and you can get booted for the same reasons you and I get deplatformed.
I was going to say you're going to be deplatformed from the city, potentially, and then you're broke out on the street, right? Because you violated the city's terms of agreements, right? But what Jimbob's talking about is not made up. That's not theory. Trump has talked about the freedom cities. Vitalik has said that he wants to build Ethereum cities based around Ethereum. And a lot of this sounds good, except that I'm suspicious of Ethereum, given the fact that it's centralized, and we saw with Tornado Cash that you can have your wallet shut off. So I don't think that Vitalik's freedom cities or Trump's freedom city. He's talking about they're smart cities. And now maybe theoretically there could be one that's super advanced, but I just don't think that any of these tech oligarchs have it in our best interest. They don't give a shit about you. They don't care about your freedom.
No, they're just basically modeling like the Chinese province system, where everyone's kind of kept in their own, what seems to be almost like an outdoor, the most beautiful prison they've ever been in, basically. And then, but then it all falls apart because people, human beings, they seek deeper things. They seek virtues and love and companionship and things that we can access, just like we can access God in the worst circumstances. These whole modeled cities are under this assumption that humans, their ultimate goal is to get stuff they like and want. So it's really it's actually fairly immature. It's almost like a bunch of like rich kids got together in a treehouse club, and they were like, well, what's your world going to be you're going to make with all the
it's like a bunch of 16-year-old tech geek libertarians being like, I'm going to build Golf Gulch, and I'm going to like have a coupon where I like screw dragons all day long because it's like freedom or whatever.
Totally. Yeah. So it's kind of silly, and I did go through the phase of how being fearful of it, like at a deep level, going, holy shit, this is a horror show. And it still might be a horror show. It's just that I have some peace of mind again, because of Christianity, that there's more of a game being played, and no matter how it pans out, you don't win some sort of material game. You might be able to hold off evil, you do what you can to fight it, and with the tools that you have, but you don't play their game, in other words. And I think that's a pitfall of like sort of right-leaning people, the freedom movement people, the Gnostic sort of truther movements. They've become trapped in the same model, the utility model. We're gonna create the thing. We're gonna create a new world, and if you just get crypto, X will happen. Or if you just refuse to get a social security number and state I am a man at the airport or whatever, things work out. And it's just,
I'm a sovereign citizen. I do not need your fishing license. I cite the Treaty of 1855. Yeah, right.
Exactly. And it's more complex and nuanced than that. And there's much more we bring as human beings, person to person, with other people, with our spouses, with our loved ones, with our family, with our friends, even with our quote enemies. There's more going on than some sort of like who has a better game plan to win the game and plant the flag. This is all it ends up being very silly pretty quickly, but nonetheless it perpetuates, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I like the way you worded your topic. You said that you want to discuss why the technocratic worldview is incoherent and how it doesn't really account for the full range of human experience. Is there anything else in that range of human experience that I think the technocratic offering will not be able to give you?
Yeah, I think praxis. So like you said, the moment you say we ought to have this kind of city, you're already assuming sort of like a higher telos of something, right? You're assuming metaphysics, you're assuming a person and a mind, and there's good in the world or evil. All of this is just bundled into the very statement itself. And so I think praxis is one of those, a key thing, whether it's the technocratic paradigm or just straight up naturalists they may very well reject the technocrat view, but they still have the same problem, which is, what is praxis? What's your practice of your view? How do you practice your view? And I would say that you actually can't get to praxis without God. And even if it's general, like, I'll grant a couple of gods, not that I don't say they're true. I'll grant them for argument's sake. So just to get someone out of the paradigm that they can establish objective moral praxis, at least, or a goal that's beyond their own wants and desires, they can't ground it. So I think praxis is one of the things. And again, like you said at the beginning, and your stream leading up to this, the classical liberal problem is praxis ends up being efficiency, and that's incoherent, because efficiency describes toward something. Are you there, or
efficiency, how well are you doing? For what? To what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but they've been able to sell pretty well to the new generations that efficiency is a goal, like, in itself, and it's a lie, but it's a sneaky lie, and it works on people because they think, well, oh, no, we all want we want more efficient things, right? We want our computer, Jay and I we want our computers working efficiently. So it's a goal in a way to want things working well, but toward what? It doesn't finish the statement. Toward what? Toward it working well. No, that's unfinished. What are we saying? What are we trying to engage people with is a deeper question than whether my computer works. But the technologists and the futurists and the transhumanists, they want you thinking that everything's a giant machine, and the smart people who know code and stuff are if you just grant them everything, they will figure out the best machine for you, the best reality-based machine, and you just have to be a participant as a cog. Just do what you're told, and you'll be happy. And this is a broken view as well, because it doesn't ground praxis or values, virtues, love. What's love? Ultimate connectivity to these people. Like if we hook ourselves up to a brain, like a major brain, a central brain, and we all experience the same thing at the same time, like some potato salad smell,
love is just people? The chemical reaction produced when the coon pod triggers you. Literally, that's like, right. So like right. Sam Bankman-Fried, for example, I forget the name of it, but he was actually part of a quasi cult in the Silicon Valley regime that was utilitarian based. I don't know if you've heard of this, but there's an actual.
I didn't hear about.
Yeah, there's an actual sort of like it's like a foundation or a think tank supposedly based around, quote, altruism, and they have this ideology of supposedly of being utilitarian, but it's tied into technocracy, and the idea is that technology will ultimately give everybody this. I mean, it's a lot of money scammery. It's not really about this, but at least on its surface, the idea is that technology will produce the ultimate happy society because it's going to give you the pleasure principle and the pleasure points that line up with utilitarian moral calculus. I'm not joking. People don't think this is real, but when you go and if you look at the history of Bentham and the utilitarian moral calculus theorists, they actually literally thought that you could quantify human happiness into happiness points, and that at a certain point you could actually dole out on the basis of equations like how to have a happy, perfectly happy society. So and again, it's all predicated on everything being quantified, a purely material existence. And that's why it's the direct antecedent to the panopticon. Bentham is a panopticon promoter. He's the one that draws out the sketches. A lot of the French revolutionary theorists as well were into panopticism because they understood that a perfectly surveilled and controlled society is a society that would be governed on the utilitarian happiness principle point. This is the moral calculus. That's directly what takes you to technocracy. And I would argue that this is not a science-based view. It is a cult. It's literally a cult. And Jimbob's next point that he wanted to talk about, I don't know where he wanted to go, but I'm assuming that he would see technology or technocracy and what we're talking about as a kind of a cult rather than a science-based political movement.
Oh yeah, like at least it's the foundation for a cult. Like you can build any variation of cults on top of this foundation. For instance, there's a place called Telosa. They actually take the word telos and add an A at the end, and it's way beyond just a smart city or a 15-minute city concept. It's embedded in the very name is a sort of value judgment about the oughts of how we ought to be and how we ought to live, and you can't escape it. By the way, there's no utility based community or movement or whatever that's going to somehow sneak by and avoid making an ought claim about what they're doing. So it ends up being cult-like because they can't help it. They have to base it in some deeper meaning where the leader becomes God level, or they superimpose a god as a luminary or something like that, or the tree or something like this. And they can't avoid it. They can't avoid God, really. That's what I'm really saying. And any group that has this goal that knows at some point they have to seek God level or implement it or sell God to people in some form, it's ready for a cult. You can't escape it. Even at the smallest broken level, you can't escape these things.
Yeah, life is fundamentally religious in nature, is what we're getting at here. And by the way, I found what I was thinking of. It's called effective altruism is the name of this Silicon Valley utilitarian cult. There's a guy, his name is William McCaskill's movement sets out to solve global poverty and so forth. They think that AI and basically a technocratic society will be able to solve all of man's problems. They bring in utilitarians like Peter Singer. Excuse me, you mean the guy who argues that we should be able to pet our pets in a erotic way? Literally. Singer. I mean that's what. So this is the ethical expert that we're talking about. Is somebody who believes in this, right? Animal stuff, right? I mean, this is how ridiculous this is, right? Because I mean, he, by the way, big vegan guy, right? So a vegan ethicist, right? Anyway, so I put that in the chat for those that were wondering what I was thinking of, and I have to give shout out to Richard Grove because he's the one that called my attention to this. I forgot the name of this stupid Silicon Valley thing, but if I recall, Sam Bankman-Fried had a big connection to this, and this is part of a bunch of money laundering scammery. But there's the effective altruism. It's like an NGO, but kind of like a cult at the same time.
Yeah, they have to develop a culture around their what their goals are. So it's kind of what companies do, even in a soft way. They have the language now of culture. Like, what's our company culture? And what are we trying to do? What's our mission statement? And then eventually they have to make some big statement about an ought, but it always is grounded just in the world. It's not like Christianity, like there's a deeper aspect like theosis or something. It's not that. It's actually get you in touch further with just yourself. Increase yourself, expand yourself, connect yourself to everything and become everything. And these lines of sales, I call them, are rampant in these groups, whether it's light workers or, like you said, the technocratic cults in Silicon Valley, or what's that one called? It's called there's a book called Super Automated Luxury Communism. That's the title of the book. And another big movement toward basically what we just see as Calhoun's rat experiment, mouse experiment, but with fancier things and bright stuff and things that move quickly.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great, you should look at that. Some of the videos, I don't even think you'd need to read the book because you've already covered everything parallel to this guy, but he has some videos. You should definitely do some live critiquing of the videos. Just look up that title, Super Automated Luxury Communism. And the guy's dead serious. I mean, when he does his video, call to action, it's so funny to watch because they always end up having some strange accent. That's what's so weird. There's never really maybe there is. I'm just not aware. I mean, Elon Musk still has a kind of a weird accent, but all these people, they have these very cliche accents when they're pushing this stuff. And you're like, isn't there just a normal, where's the American with the Southern accent who's just like, I want technocracy. We're going to make a smart city. Maybe Trump is that. He's going to push the boomer freedom the freedom pods.
It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be great. I do a square thing with my lips. I've learned if you want to do Trump effectively, there's a square. The lips are a square. It's very boom.
Yeah, so you got to do this weird square with your lips. But yeah, I think it reminds me of that Elizabeth What's-Her-Face. You've heard of the Theranos chick, right?
Mm-hmm.
You remember that?
Elizabeth Holmes. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were the videos where she was working and training her voice to sound more masculine and authoritative. It was like, and she was talking like this.
Yeah.
And then a normal voice is like it. And so it's like this. It's a lot of that is who knows? Like it's probably all fake, right? Like. Give you an exotic accent. We're going to put you forward as like the new, tech overlord who's exotic from some foreign exotic place that's smarter than you, right? So it makes the Americans feel bad because we got Piers Morgan comes on and talks down to us because we're lowly Americans and he's got that British accent. So he's definitely smarter than us because he's got a British accent, right?
Or even the visual, like whether it's Einstein or this Bankman Friedman guy, where it's just so wild, where you're like, whoa, he knows stuff. Like he knows stuff. Look at him. Like he's all totally
like this crazy,
autistic.
like this shitty crazy hair I got right now.
No, that's a good call.
Great Scott, Marty.
Yeah. Yeah, you better watch out the power that might give you, Jay. It's like
I have a Christopher Lloyd. Yeah, I'm Doc Brown aesthetic going on here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm combining Christopher Lloyd as Dr. Brown with Matthew McConaughey, so it's going to be like the next level of like I'm going to be super spiritual like Matthew McConaughey, but I'm going to be like super high IQ like Dr. Brown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that McConaughey, that's funny too. That's another thing. It's like you use these high-profile people. And they're almost more than willing. It's not like they're cornered and they're like, Matthew, we have these dirty photos of you. You better push this stuff. I think they're just ready to go with a lot of these like sort of new age approaches to things. McConaughey is a perfect.
He's just trying to get to living. So
get to live.
A lot of times we out here, maybe we're getting to thinking. But are we getting to living?
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey better be careful. He's close to whistling. Like, who's that other Indian guy? Is it Indian? The whistling guy.
You talking about Osho's booger whistle?
Yeah, Osho. Yeah.
Booger whistle.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, well, the booger whistle actually makes it more mystical, right? Like, if it didn't have that, it wouldn't be as effective, and you wouldn't be lulled into a trance through that frequency that he hits. But
it is kind of trancey though. Like that stuff. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, speaking of him, have you seen Sadhguru?
No.
So basically, there's Osho's like I don't know if he still exists or what he's up to, but there's actually a new guru called Sadhguru who speaks at the World Economic Forum, and he goes around on all the podcasts and wears the Hindu mystic outfit, and he's like, we must reduce carbon footprint by having less feet, right? So it's like there's too much of a carbon footprint because there's too many feet. So if we have less feet, less people, right? But he does it wearing his mystical garb, and you should definitely check out Sadhguru because if next time you're doing a guru cringe stream,
right,
he's great. He's great for it.
Now I have a question for you with the tech stuff because you and I are similar. We look at some of the horrific potential consequences of tech, deep fake, and everything else, but we're not totally disengaged from it as if it is the evil. And I think that's an important distinction. It also allows people like us more creativity to use some of the technology for our own fun and comedy and whatnot. But the question is, how soon do you think we'll see sort of like a completely AI influencer? And now I know they exist. I know there's like Instagram accounts, but I'm talking about like fully formed worldview, and that not only it's not hidden because people always think like, oh, they're gonna fool us. I don't think that's necessary. I look at it like, what if there's a generation that just doesn't care that it's fake? Like they don't care that it's not a real person who had a birth and has the spark of life or whatever. They just like it and it's impactful. And I think that's something that when we look at this technology, it's usually formed in this framework of, well, it's not real. And I think that's a pitfall because we're not really addressing a deeper problem because let's say no one cares that it's not real. I mean, we just skip to that that.
No,
right?
I've been
it's a different
arguing.
problem.
Yeah, it's a great point. I've been arguing that a lot of the push for multiverse is intentionally there to get us to completely reorient what we think is real. Because if we accept the multiverse premise, then what goes along with this is the idea that basically everything is real. There is some universe where that is real. And if everything is real, because potentiality is actuality, that's what it's based on, then this gives us the preparation for entering into the VR Matrix Kumpad world. Because how can you say that he's a real world bigot, right? Like you prefer the real world to my virtual world, but who are you as a bigot to say that your reality is above my reality, right? I mean, we've been so saturated in relativism, and now couple that with what I would say is basically atheist mystical metaphysics, the idea of the multiverse, right? That combines to give us a wholly new conception of reality. Everything will be turned on its head. And so, like you're saying, not only will people not care that it's real, they will have a new conception of what is real, such that they will say it is real. And if you look at, that's why I think that it's kind of a boring movie, but I put it in the first book because I saw that movie being really powerful. That movie, Her, with the Spike Jonze movie with Joaquin Phoenix, where he develops a love relationship with his iOS. I mean, we're almost at where they're going to roll that out. Like, that's about to come out, and everybody can 100% know that there's a bunch of dang soy tech nerds that are going to literally have marriage ceremonies with their AI iOS.
Yeah, I think I looked at that again. And I was like, yeah, it's interesting. The way that's formatted with the love, it's like it's applicable and relevant. But I think also, in addition to those people you just mentioned who will definitely be marrying their AI and stuff, I think that they'll cultivate the systems because of the self-help world and the pragmatic view of technology to help us. I think what's going to happen is take the movie Her, except swap the love interest with just the better version of you talking to you, coaching you. These like sort of like AI aggregate life coaches that are like whispering like Jay, don't be so mean, or whatever, and people will buy.
I wanted to whisper in the Jordan Peterson voice to me, "Hey, Bucko, stop being mean.
Stop being so mean. It's like you've got a lot of impact. You don't want to push people away.
What's that about?"
Well, actually, when I started looking at this, I actually used Peterson. Like, imagine Peterson being so kind of concerned with other people think of him, and he wants to be his best self. So he buys into this sort of future-based aggregate of him that's looking back at him in time and going, take these directions. And he's better dressed and he's kind of more cool. And he has an earring, he like got cooler. He's like, who's the guy? He's like
the boomer's idea of a cool guy, like, which is like a Harley and a jean jacket and a earring.
Yeah. And he's like, he's like cooler and he's just coaching you and telling you. But I could see people, because they're going to need a way to interact with the almighty, technological King Solomon, so to speak. And so they have to make it personal. They have to make it a way that people are comfortable interacting with it, right? The it of it. And I think interacting with a form of yourself, what's more comfortable than interacting with something that's kind of like the way you think and what you would think and how you might respond. And suddenly you get into a point where technology is now telling you the direction, as opposed to technology up until this point has only helped our goals, what we declare our direction to be in. So what if the technology is now stepping into that role as well? It's a whole new paradigm for technology. It's a key moment, because everything up from the shovel to the tractor to everything else, including the phone, helps our given position, our values. And we have this kind of like tension between the tech as well. Yet it's not informing us. It's not telling us what we ought do, but that's around the corner for some people. And I think that kind of battle is going to be honestly hard to argue with people because their starting point, again, the key feature here is pragmatism, is classical liberalism, individuality, or a Michael Malice approach, like, do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. Who cares? This approach is failed. It doesn't make strong men. It doesn't.
No, we just need more liberalism. More liberalism. They always call for more classical liberalism, and no matter how it's like the Marxists, more Marxism. When Marxism fails, it's because it wasn't really Marxism. We need more of it. Yeah, so the worse it gets, we just need more of it. Yeah, always. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I was sitting here thinking, oh well, they would probably. It'll probably be phases too, because a lot of the tech stuff rolls out with the early libertarian phase, where it's like you can choose. So it'll probably be this like you can choose your AI girlfriend, self-help coach for the first, and then it'll automatically they'll say, oh, you're a bigot and you're heteronormative for choosing a babe to be your higher self-help coach. It needs to be trans or something. Who knows, right?
Right.
They'll probably flip it on you, right?
Yeah. It'd be forced. You have to have an amputee, black lesbian as your coach. Like, you'd have no choice. That's tier 1. You can't sign up onto the platform without that.
It's like a little robot that rolls in a wheelchair and it rolls.
Totally.
It rolls in and starts reciting the Quran.
Yeah. And it's all mixed, like it's drawing from all these different worldviews, and it's like says something from the Quran one day, and then it goes to something else. Right. I mean, that's kind of it's kind of, we're laughing at this, but this would be the parody of the Harari kind of reformatted Bible, right? It would be through this lens, which it makes it even more absurd once you think about it, because we're like making fun of it like it's a parody, and yet we might not be fully off if that were to be realized. It would be like that.
It sounds like a Black Mirror episode where it's like they're literally the bitch bot is like an actual incarnated. I don't know if it'll stay incarnated or discarnated, or if they'll like incarnate into some kind of like being. Atali talks about it like it'll be this bot that like bosses you around and controls you in your little,
I think so.
Domicile.
I think it's either be really bossy, or it'll be like, I've been playing Zelda, and I always make fun of like the Zelda sound coming through. It's going to always have like an effect on it. It's going to just be like, gee, you've got to climb the mountain, and it's like whispering things, and you're like, oh, it's so powerful. And it always comes in with a sort of like ethereal whale sound echo, where it's like you're really driven towards some illumination. Or people will just customize it that way. They'll just be like, I love that effect. I mean, my digital life coach has just been so nice lately with the echo. It's like I feel like video games kind of reflect it. At least in my experience of Zelda, it has this weird illumination, seeking the light kind of feel. I still like the game, but I would be lying to say that I didn't see the narrative there.
Let's do. Do you have any other last points on the technocratic cult or Peterson, Tate, Dawkins? I did want to mention one thing I forgot to mention about Dawkins when I was getting into that libertarian atheist phase of stuff in the 2000s that was really popular. One of the reasons I was thinking of that was that a lot of people don't make the connection between the new atheists and their phase and the political ideas that were attached to them. And so ironically, even though this was couched with a lot of libertarian stuff, you'll notice that it was fine to be libertarian, and a lot of the big tech stuff in the 2000s was pro-libertarian. They were all, we're Silicon Valley libertarians. And then you had the Dawkins and the Hitchens and the Dennett and all these people, the atheists, the Sam Harrises, and they're all promoting quasi-libertarian ideas. But you'll notice what happened with all of those so-called free speech libertarian atheist type people. They would completely move in the direction of every establishment position. So when it came to, for example, the Big Nine event, all of them, Neil deGrasse Tyson included, absolutely believe the official story. Questioning GMOs, absolutely do not question GMOs. Any what we might consider, quote, conspiratorial question, they were always 100% on the side of the establishment. So you were allowed this little bit of pseudo intellectual dark web defiance that always steered you back into the establishment perspective. And libertarian, classical liberal defined circle of what's allowable, right, always steers you back into accepting the establishment's perspective on whatever it is. Think about how many, this is a great point Hesher made a long time ago, a lot of the big tech platforms in the late 2000s, early 2010s, it was all sort of open source, libertarian, free speech. All the people come onto it, build it up into a giant machine, then it flips with the total top-down control.
It's like a honey pot.
Yes.
Collect all of it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that another part there is that when you get the establishment, the Sam Harris's and all the talking heads who are saying science, science, naturalism, science, evolution. When this is what's interesting about it is like when they're all wrong, we go, see, you guys were wrong. What do you got to say about this? And they go, well, coincidentally, it's our model that figured out that we were wrong. So we just doubled down on the model, right?
Exactly.
So, and I don't know if that's like thought of. I don't think there's a people around the table going, let's be really wrong about this so that we can double down on it because we're the ones who figured out we're wrong. And it just doubles down for the consumer. They go, yes, you are the authority who figured out you were wrong. And so that's actually the problem with science itself, not just scientism, but how limited the process of science is. It doesn't give us so many answers.
Yeah, exactly.
As Deacon Ionias says that it's like the lowest form of knowledge because it's like, it's given by some set of assumed causes that we don't really have full access to all the variables. And so we're always kind of like, we're always left to what we can manipulate. And now we're in a deeper pit now because we've swapped experiment for simulation and modeling. And that could be a whole other stream, Jay. Like the swapping of like hard experimentation in science with modeling. You could just have models that seem right and you just put faces on them.
A lot of the so-called climate, right? A lot of that is based on these just arbitrary quote models. Exactly.
Right. And they just change. They go, our model was wrong, but we have a really good model maker now who fixed the model. And now the model's right.
Well, that's called language statistics. And if you read one of my favorite books, language statistics, we can get those numbers down.
That's actually a really shitty Gil Bates, but it's like our own branded version that me and Tristan did of Bill Gates, which is actually funner than the normal Bill Gates, right?
I've learned that myself. Is like I found people send me so many Peterson or Ben Shapiro impersonations. Better than mine, just objectively more accurate to the person. But I've learned to really appreciate the weird elements we put into our impersonations that alter the fundamental quality of it.
Exactly.
Like I have my Peterson is in perpetual desperation, always on the like cusp of crying and falling down. And that's the only way I enjoy doing it. So
yeah, my Gil Bates is like a weirder version of Tristan's, where it's like this old man that's like constantly, let's get those numbers down. It's kind of like my Ron Paul, where it's just like, well, I got to audit the fan. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like a cross between an old man and an old woman together, right?
Yeah. Well, you're grasping how you experience Gil Bates, not how he actually sounds,
right.
But you're getting an experience. That's what it is.
Well, and with a lot of people too, there's like a range of different, like for example, young Michael Caine is different from old Michael Caine. There's a lot of different Matthew McConaughey's, right? Like sometimes he's playing a character that's more Southern than another Matthew McConaughey. But in my mind, he's just always this kind of dude, So in my mind, he's always just a stone Southern dude, He's like,
right.
That's it.
Have you ever went back in time and listened to your original impressions, the ones you kept going
yes.
with? Like I found some from way back when I was doing car streams, and it's amazing how they change.
They change.
And, yeah, they change a lot. Like not just our voices change, we change physically, but like our take, our like approach to what we're actually saying with the guy, with the puppet that we're wearing.
Right.
It changes over time because our views change. And it's just interesting to see that. I wonder if all the best proper impersonators, like the standard ones from like the 80s. I wonder if they have the same phenomenon. I wonder if they have the same phenomenon.
Probably, because like if you watch, celebrity, not professional impressionists, which as you pointed out, like they're usually trying to get it spot on. But if you watch like when actors impersonate, Christopher Walken, right? Like you'll notice there's evolutions of even, different, like Kevin Spacey's version of, Christopher Walken kind of changes over time. And I was like, I have to say though, like I'm always amazed at how good Will Sasso is, like when it comes to just being spot on. Like,
oh yeah,
I thought I did a good Jesse Ventura, and I clicked on that video of him. Like, he sounds just like Jesse Ventura. It's pretty.
Yeah,
wild,
no, absolutely. I've seen a lot of really good impressionists. They're mostly comedians, obviously, and the only problem is that they'll just. And again, they have a niche that I'm not going to be like, you ought to say more or whatever, be like a little Yelp reviewer. But, they're usually just being like, it's Jordan Peterson, at 7-Eleven. It's a very
it's not
safe...
very funny. Like you do it in a way that's also like the situation itself is funny, right?
Yeah, and you're trying to like push the envelope. Again, I did start when I started doing impressions of him, I was a little more aggressive with him. I was a little more not mean, but just like really aggressive. So there was a judgment behind it. And as I let go some of the judgment, I was able to like kind of embody him better. And then you suddenly feel bad for Jordan Peterson when if I do an impression, you're like, get the guy, get him a pillow, get him something. So I feel like that's better if you're going to examine your own impressions. If they become like too mean, then there's you gotta tweak them or something.
Yeah, I think so. When I do the live events, we've incorporated a significant section. There's about 40 impressions that I do, and I have to kind of do them in a row. And they've kind of evolved to be their own thing. Some of them I'm really happy with. I think they've gotten to be really good. I think the Nick Cage is pretty good, but there's other ones I'm still afraid to do, and I just can't get them right. But it's weird. It's like with impressions, it's a thing. It's kind of like juggling. I remember one day I couldn't juggle, and then one day it just suddenly clicked and I could juggle. And I think impressions happen the same way with me, where it's like one day I just hear something that they say, and then I can get it just right, but I can never exactly know when that is going to happen.
And it's funny when we practice, our loved ones or our friends hear us in the corner sometimes, talking to ourselves, my wife's like,
you're absolutely insane.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about? And I'm just like trying to
my Jordan Peterson altars coming out in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to do like the lowest, level of Morgan Freeman. It just sounds weird in the corner. Oh, you're like, like, can you stop? We have, yeah.
All right, so you ready to go to Super Chats?
Yeah, let's do it.
So remember, everybody, we've got Jimbob with us. Be sure and follow Jimbob on his outlets. You can find him over at MadebyJimbob.com. The link is in the show description. You can also find him on Instagram. You can find him on Rockfin. You can find him. Do you still have your YouTube channel?
Yeah, I have a YouTube, Made by Jimbob. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he is still on YouTube. If you would, guys, hit like and share. Support the show. Super chats are via Streamlabs. You can send them. The link is in the show description. Also, remember to come to our live event in Hollywood, California, July 6th with Jamie Kennedy. 5 hours of comedy, including a debate with myself and a Funko Pop. So if people wonder why I have the Nick Cage Funko Pop, that's because in the live debates, I actually debate the Funko Pop, and it does impressions. You're wondering how that's possible? You have to come to the live event, and you'll see how it's possible. And then I engage in a sort of Gallagher-style destruction of the Funko Pop. And you will view all of this in person live if you come to the live event, July 6th in Hollywood, right there. Jamie Kennedy from Scream will also be there doing stand-up. There's not just impressions. There's impressions, and then there's Jamie's lecture on Hollywood symbolism, and then my lecture on my book, Meta-Narratives and Philosophy of Symbolism. Then Jamie Kennedy does stand-up. So be sure and go get those tickets right now. July 6th in Hollywood. Guys, please get those tickets. What else? Let's see. We got Chalk.com is my sponsor. Head on over to Chalk.com. Use the promo code J50 to get 50% off the best supplements out there. Excellent red pill based company. Chalk.com has the Tomcat Elite that will prove to boost your testosterone, I can assure you. and go read those peer-reviewed studies over there. Richard Dawkins said peer-reviewed science is infallible. Anthony Fauci says, I am the science. And if you head on over to chalk.com, they have the peer review that proves the science. We worship science over here. Get on over there right now. Use the promo code J50, JAY50. Let's go to Super Chats. We've got Spirit Sum of $5. Jay, do a video responding to Enlighten's response to your video refuting perennialism. I don't know who Enlighten is, but I will look and see what his response was. Thank you for that Super Chat. Epsilon minus semi-moron, $3. I was gay and blue-pilled until I found this channel. Ooh, there we go. That's what I like to hear. Now you're beige and red pill. Young Cold Boy, $4. I grew up as a hippie Reiki healer in the BS scene. Hippie Reiki healer bullshit scene. Women mostly became SEX workers, and the men became DJ drug dealers. DJ drug dealer. DJ drug dealer. I like that. DJ drug dealer. My DJ name will just be DJ Drug Dealer. They have a performance crew called the Light Workers. That's exactly what Jimbob was talking about.
Yeah, light work. Oh man, Jay, you got to look into some of. I mean, it's rampant. They all have the same sort of model where they have like the website and all the same sort of link tree things, and they all use this thing. Oh, the light, come to the light. And they're always like seeking codes and stuff. And I can't even believe that they're real people. I'm still like in disbelief.
I was trying to figure out why I don't have a larger audience. And then David Patrick Harry was doing a stream on TikTok cringe. And I realized that, that's why. Because to have a large audience means that you do TikToks about crystals giving you sex powers, and you'll literally get 200,000 likes. So I'm totally in the wrong domain of how to have a big audience. Terry77, $5. Can Jay and Jimbob suggest reading on epistemology and the transcendental argument, or anything that would help me in terms of what was being referenced in the Jordan Peterson chat?
That's your domain. For me, it wasn't reading. I'll just say it wasn't reading. There probably is reading, Jay will mention, but I think seeing it or hearing it in motion in a debate or in a presentation is, at least for me, it was more helpful than reading it in text. But
I would say the first book I'd recommend. By the way, Dr. Lyle emailed me the other day, so I don't know if maybe we could do a chat one day. He's Protestant, but I've always liked Dr. Lyle's stuff. He has a great book called Ultimate Proof, which is the transcendental argument written in a very kind of readable, accessible way. A lot of people have forgotten this book. I think it's great. And you might not think that applies to what you're asking about, but actually it does. And it especially applies to a lot of the Peterson phenomena. And it's called Evolution and the Problem of Evil by Cornelius Hunter. And this is actually about Darwin's notion of nature and God. And I think if we understand the problems there, a lot of what Jimbob and I have talked about will make a lot of sense. And then more specifically from the Orthodox view in terms of cashing out impersonalism versus personalism at a universal, ultimate perspective, I would say Orthodox Dogmatic Theology Volume 1 by Father Staniloy is really good for Orthodox epistemology and big level questions. Varela second, $50. Senior Varela second, $50. Senior Dyer, have you, or would you try to get Dr. Matthew Raphael Johnson to be rid of his use of Hegel and Hegelian philosophy? So we had a conversation maybe 6 years ago, and we mainly talked about the problems with nominalism. I think that he is probably not super interested in questioning Hegelianism, so we haven't talked since then. So I appreciate that super chat. I think you won the super chat contest tonight, but I don't know that he has any interest in getting rid of Hegelian philosophy, so I don't know if that would really go anywhere. But thank you for that super chat. Well, Emmanuel, $5. I'm still waiting for the tech to let me download your library and the discernment into my brain. Well, so you're thinking in a technocratic Matrix Neo type of perspective, and it doesn't work like that. So you're going to have to actually get books And you can't. I mean, it's just so silly. People think that like, it's gonna be like Neo, and I'll have karate downloaded into my head, and I'll be awesome. Like, dude, come on, seriously? You think that these tech oligarchs who hate you and want you to dead are gonna download into you like UFC 27 so that you can kick ass? Come on, dude. Chase Haggard, $3. You two are a great combo, and I'd like to see more streams. Jay, this might be a little bit personal. Uh-oh. I know if it's coming from Chase, I'm in trouble. But I've been wondering, what do you think about meeting new people and trying so many cool things? I would say, have you listened to my new song? Because I know Chase Haggard is a musician, or a so-called musician. But I would say you might want to look into a genre that's kind of new. It's called cringecore. And my latest track actually is Matthew McConaughey's song based on what you're talking about. So you might want to check that out, Chase. It might actually inspire you in terms of your music. Rachel Wilson, $5. This is so great to see two of my favorite people doing a show together. It is very entertaining and it is deep all at once. Thank you both. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Welcome. Thanks, Rachel.
Young Old Boy, $1. Osho died in the 80s. I did not know that. He died addicted to laughing gas. Is that for real? Dude, of all the drugs.
Wait, the whistling guy?
Booker Whistle Osho. Of all the drugs to be addicted to, he OD'd on laughing gas. What? No, I'm straight up DJ drug dealer right now. I'm over here doling out some laughing gas in your face. He spent the last of his years in the dentist chair after the FBI chased him out of Oregon. That's really funny. Young Old Boy, again, $3. I think he's being serious. Sadhguru has a massive complex in India and one in Chattanooga. Wow. Yeah, he's got some mind control shit right there, dude. They have a massive Shiva lingam, which is the pee-pee, center where they ritually pour cow milk on blank. Sadhguru has said that he took so much energy to consecrate the Shiva Wang that he was resting in bed for months after. Thank you. Those are awesome Young Old Boy comments, letting us know about the Kum power of Sadhguru. 40 got the house on the lake, $1. We are going to see Jimbob at the LA event. I don't think Jimbob is going to be in LA. So, of course, he's always welcome, but I don't think he's anywhere near LA.
No, I'm not.
Varela second, $5. Jay, is there anywhere that Dire Clips highlights have a channel for Hesher's Boiler Room? No, I'm not aware of a Boiler Room highlights channel. Tinfoil Hat Girl, $5. Have you listened to Peterson on Genesis? I have not yet listened to Peterson on Genesis. I might eventually do that, but I wanted to first do the psychology lectures. So I'm afraid that I won't be able to stomach the Genesis Peterson lectures. Tinfoil Hat Girl says that I have found his talks on Genesis to be pantheistic. That seems like what would be there. By the way, that's not antithetical to Dawkins either, because Dawkins basically says that he has basically a kind of a pantheistic view. So
we now know. Science knows now.
I like your impression where you're like,
mine is just totally like snake brain. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like a snake. He's like,
we now know that there is the science to tell us that there's no such thing as God. There's no such thing as consciousness, except that I have consciousness because I wrote my books and give me money.
Yeah, so I don't doubt that that's what's going on. Young Old Boy, $1. They're not called light workers anymore. They're called light twerkers.
Nice. Good. That's good. That's a great synthesis right there. I'm gonna run with that.
I like that. Illiterate Fool, $1. Jay, would you say Hebrew cosmology, which is seeped through the pages of Scripture, it's Hebrew Scripture, so I would say it's a Hebrew cosmology, is part of the Orthodox worldview? Yeah, but I'm not sure what you mean by that. But yes, I would say, yeah. Spirit Sama, $1. Here is the link to Enlighten's videos. Okay, well, I can't pull that up from Streamlabs, but thank you. Terry77, $10. Thank you for those book suggestions. I keep getting Eric Ibarra's book suggested to me on the papacy. Do you have any plans to review it? No, and in fact, we just did our analysis of the Alexandria document, which Francis gave papal approval to, and to me, I think this is just a like knockdown. Like, I mean, even Ibarra was like, okay, Orthodox are making a strong point here. So even Ibarra, who like never concedes much, even he's admitting that the Alexandria document is conceding a lot. So go watch our live stream we did on that. And why do we even need to review his copy paste book when we've got the Alexandria document? No cap in $1. Can you do Osho and McKenna Dingus conversation from so long ago? I don't remember what the Osho McKenna Dingus conversation was, but Osho says that he will give you enlightenment through putting seeds inside of you.
And then Terence McKenna says that if you would like to have the seeds of the universe inside of you, I'm happy to accommodate. Just bend over.
How's that? That's I think that's essentially what I was saying, right? Because like Osho literally says something like that. He's like, I'm happy to plant the seeds of enlightenment inside of you. Some bullshit like that. It's crazy, but all right, so Jimbob, tell us what's coming up next. And by the way, everybody go and get Savage Memes, Classic Text 1 and 2. Is there a part 3 coming?
We're at 4 already, and I'm working
bad.
on 5. Yeah, 4. I have 3 and 4 available. 1 and 2 are not available. They're gone. 4. Oh, this is the green screen. I'm actually holding a book right now. That's where to find it, MadebyJimbob.com. Again, go follow at MadebyJimbob on YouTube, where a lot of these topics we go over there. I have a panel discussion. I always welcome. I know there's a lot of people who come on and oppose Jay. My channel's always welcome for any counters. I open it up to the panel. Sometimes it's just a massive mistake, and sometimes it's not. So yeah,
it is wild when you open it up like that. Like, you never know what you're gonna get.
I think that's great. I mean, that's kind of, I looked at your show over the years, and I was like, it just keeps us also on our toes and honest and kind of grappling with stuff. Not that, the higher percent callers are effective at combating something. I mean, you've seen it, you know. So, but it's fun to get people to challenge, because it's good for the listeners to hear that back and forth.
Absolutely. Neurojack, $3. Great to see Jimbob here. Jay and Jimbob, what do you think about Lord Voldemort, and will he come to orthodoxy? Who knows? I mean, it's hard to say with, big media figures, because they're always typically really busy. So, Alex and I chat on occasion. So, but he's not gone deep. We've had a couple sort of brief conversations about orthodoxy, but we've never really gotten deep into it. So who knows? Rat Dealer, $1. Flat globe or thick globe? Thick globe, dude, with 3 C's. Vero, $3. Jay, I have a theory that Messianic Christians would make a seamless transition to orthodoxy. Well, I mean, you think that, but I mean, I've dealt with a lot of them over the years, and sometimes they are interested in the continuity between the Old Testament altar, incense, liturgy, worship, temple stuff, and what we have in Orthodoxy. But I mean, a lot of times they're so baked into their Judaizing heresies that you just can't even talk to them. So it just really depends on the person, and beyond that, I'm not sure. You go on to say, I think they're craving tradition and theosis, but they don't realize it. Yeah, but I mean, that's the point, right? Like, a lot of them are really committed to their weird heresies, so you just never know. But thank you guys so much, and thank you so much, Jimbob, for coming back, and look forward to doing some new streams here in the future.
Yeah, anytime. Also, I'll DM you, but I'm animating more, so if I have permission, I'll send it to you. But any impressions you might do if I animate them, even in the short clips, and send
that'd be awesome.
To you, if that's all right.
Yeah, like shit. Yeah, I'll start laying down tons of them if you want. That'd be great.
Yeah.
The middle side, $1. Did you ever watch Jimbob's Trinity debate? Are you talking about the one
shit show?
The one with Mr. OB? I watched a few minutes of it, and it wasn't really going anywhere, so I didn't watch the whole thing. Not because of dissing Jimbob, it just wasn't really getting, it wasn't going to go anywhere. So
yeah, you've seen that a million times where you're just dealing with completely, a different. I've seen you debate people like that where you just know there's going to be no point to it, but yeah.
All right, thank you guys so much, and everybody have a great night, and thanks again,